Unfortunately, I had to move back in with my family after my most recent breakup. He and I were living together in Boston in an apartment we had just rented. A little piece of advice: never sign a lease with someone you've recently started dating. He wasn't the person I thought he was. My parents live in Western Massachusetts. If you've ever been to Massachusetts, you know that the further west you go, the more rural it typically gets. I'm not a country girl. I prefer to be in or near a major city, especially since I'm still in my 20s. My parents' area is super boring. I'm hoping I'm only here temporarily until I find another apartment I can afford on my own, though I'll be staying away from Boston for reasons. I had to get a job back at the urgent care facility I used to work at before I moved. They welcomed me back enthusiastically, even if it's just temporary until I move again. The trade-off with this job, though, is that I tend to work undesirable hours, meaning overnights. Though the shifts are easy, they're boring, and they completely mess up my sleep schedule and social life. Not that social life is even that great around here. After my shifts, sometimes I'll stop for what's considered my dinner, usually takeout, since not much is open at these hours. This morning, I got out at 4 a.m., and there's a bagel place that opens at that time and serves a lot of types of food. So I stopped by there and grabbed a chicken sandwich and a salad to eat once I got home. I also had to make a pit stop for gas as well. I stopped at the local Shell station, one of the few gas stations open at this hour that was on the way home. The parking lot for this station is huge, and yet I hardly ever see any other cars there, even during the day. I went inside to pay cash to save a little money. When I went back outside to the pump, there was now another car at one of the other pumps. It was a blue sedan. A guy got out of the car as I was walking over to the pump I was at. As I began fueling, I noticed him start to fuel up as well. I guess he locked the handle in place so that it would automatically keep dispensing gas without him holding it, because he walked through the two pumps to my side and then said to me, "Want to see a funny trick?" I immediately hated this interaction, but for some reason I said, "What's the trick?" He then started doing that stupid old trick where you pretend you're pulling your finger off with your other hand by just folding it down. He kept looking down at his hands and then back at me with this kind of sarcastic-looking expression, as if he knew what he was doing was stupid. But honestly, I couldn't tell. I fake laughed so that he'd go away, but he didn't stop. He kept doing the trick even after I looked away, and tried my best to pretend not to notice anymore. When I felt the click of the gas nozzle indicating that the tank was full, I was so relieved. I quickly ratcheted the nozzle back to the pump and hurried inside for my change. When I came back outside, the man wasn't in sight anymore, yet his car was still there, and the hose was still pumping gas into his car. I didn't want to stick around to catch his attention again. I got back in my car, though just out of paranoia, I checked the back seats just to make sure he wasn't hiding back there. I locked the doors, and then I was back on the road. I was home in about 5 minutes after that. I was so excited to eat my 4:30 a.m. dinner. I picked up the spare key from my parents' hiding spot, unlocked the door, and then quickly hid it back in its hiding spot. I locked the door once I entered, as I always do. I went straight to the kitchen to eat. I make sure to be quiet when I get home late so as not to wake up my parents. We only have 2 cars in the family, so I share my mom's car. I didn't need a car in Boston anyway, but since I moved back, I'd just been using the hidden spare key they would hide in the front to let myself in. As I was at the table eating, I heard the front door being unlocked and then opening and closing. I stopped chewing and froze to listen with a mouthful of food. I said, "Mom, Dad." No answer. I didn't hear any footsteps or anything. I hurried out of the kitchen to take a peek in the foyer. No one was there. I felt like my heart was in my throat. I ran up the stairs to my parents' room and barged in. I was horrified to see both my parents in bed, and they were both awakened by my very forceful opening of the door. I said very quietly, but in a clear panic, that someone just came inside the house. If you enjoyed it so far, please hit the subscribe button if you liked the video. My dad jumped out of bed and hurried downstairs. I cautiously followed behind him. He turned on all the lights of every room we passed. Then he went out front to check for the spare key, and it was missing. My mom and I were absolutely horrified, yet my mom still found the time to lecture me for not checking my surroundings before replacing the key. My dad began searching every room in the house, and we followed. When he was done checking my older brother's room, he left to continue searching and left the lights on in there. I stayed behind in this room and decided to check a couple of the spots that I felt my dad had missed, because I know internally I didn't expect to find anyone. I checked under the bed, and then I checked the closets. Nothing. So I went downstairs to the main floor. It seemed my dad was already checking in the basement. I was honestly horrified to go into the basement right now, even with my dad down there. So I stayed on the middle floor with my mom. But curiosity still got me, and I went to the dining room, which is adjacent to the foyer by the front door. I got down on my knees and looked under the table, and there he was. It truly did not feel real. There was that man from the gas station hiding under the dining room table. I recognized him instantly. I screamed as loud as I could, and in response my mom started to scream too. My 65-year-old dad came up the stairs as fast as he could, ready to fight this intruder. The man came out from under the table and began fending off my dad, who is at least 20 years his senior. As my mom and I saw him overpowering my dad, we began doing whatever we could as well, hitting and punching at the man as my dad still held on to him. It was when all three of us were attacking him that he finally decided to retreat and fled through the front door. This was when we called the cops, and thank God for a quick response time. However, that man still had the key to the front door. That night, the police left a police car parked in our driveway to deter that man from coming back. My dad wedged a chair in front of the front door as well and slept in the living room. The next day, he switched out the lock to the front door, and with that, my parents' days of hiding a key outside were over. I do feel guilty for bringing that dangerous man to my parents' house, and it was definitely on me for being careless. But honestly, I think that man followed me with his headlights off because I didn't see any cars behind me the entire ride home. I'm happy for my and my family's safety though. However, this just made me want to move out of here even more.